Hi guys, it's Kyne. Welcome back to my channel. So this video is going to be a wig tutorial on the hair that I'm wearing here, which as a matter of fact is 100% human hair. I haven't done one of these in so long. You guys know that my wig tutorials are like almost exclusively on synthetic hair, but I don't know, I wanted to diversify for my channel and learn more of a new skill set for me. So be sure to expect a few more human hair videos on this channel in the near future. And I realize human hair wigs seems very like high up there in terms of price, but if you go online and buy the bundles yourself and make the wig yourself, like I'm about to show you how in this video, you can make it happen for pretty cheap. The hair that I use is just from AliExpress from a company called Ali Grace, who has sponsored this video, and they sent over 3 bundles and a frontal of straight 613 hair. I'll put all of the exact details down in the description for those of you who speak that language. This is how the finished product turned out. I think it looks gorgeous, but you guys are gonna see exactly how I did it from start to finish, so let's get started. Okay, so I started off with 3 bundles and a frontal of straight 613 hair. So I technically colored this wig twice because I had like no clue what I was doing. I was just experimenting with products and having fun. I started by toning the hair with a Wella toner in T26, I believe, which, sidebar, I followed all the rules on the box, but I didn't realize you had to tone on wet hair. I went to Sally's the next day and I was like, 3 bottles of toner was not enough. And my friend who works there, she was like, well, did you do it on wet hair or dry hair? And when I said dry, she thought it was like the funniest thing she's ever heard. So you can laugh at me for that. Anyway, the color in the end, it was still super platinum. This is how it turned out. Later on, I'll color it again because I was having second thoughts about this shade of platinum. But right now, I'll show you how I made the wig. So the first thing that you need is a canvas wig block. For styling wigs, a styrofoam head is okay, but for making a wig and sewing it down, you really need something true to size to a real head. So I recommend making this investment. The second thing you need is a wig cap. I really ought to use a nude wig cap to match the blonde hair, but I couldn't find one for the life of me, at least on short enough notice. So I settled for a black dome cap, which is just made out of spandex so it can stretch. So you have to start off by placing your frontal at the front of the cap and align the hairline with the edge of the cap, pushing it maybe like a centimeter forward and pin it in. And that centimeter forward is for those of us with large heads. You don't want to be pulling down your lace constantly to cover your huge forehead. Brush the hair forward and pin down the back of the frontal with the cap. And we want to pin it down in a way that the back edge of the frontal lays perfectly flat with the cap, aka the mannequin head. The hairline doesn't need to be flat. In fact, it's very likely it isn't going to be. It's the back of the frontal that needs to lay flat. So adjust that accordingly with pins, and then you can start sewing. So get yourself a jumbo curved needle. They are perfect for this. You're going to spend hours doing this, so might as well get yourself a good needle. And as for thread, I'm using black cotton thread because it's easiest for you to see. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd match it to the hair color just like I'd match the cap too. But in the back of my head, I also wanted to dye this wig darker anyway. Long story long, I ended up redoing quite a bit of this stitching with brown thread in order to be a little bit more invisible to my brown hair. But I'll show you the footage of me using the black thread with the same techniques so that you can see it better. Now, if you have experience sewing by hand with the needle and thread, this will probably come easier to you. It's one of those things that's probably a little awkward to get started, but once you get the hang of it, you just get into this rhythm. When I sew the next stitch, I make sure the needle is going through a loop in my thread that I just make kind of by pushing the excess thread in front of the needle, I guess. That way every stitch is being pulled into the next one, if you can see with this visual. And then I always pull my needle away from the hair and towards the cap side, and that sort of creates those teeth that I think look nicer. Now, I've seen this method called a blanket stitch. As you know, there's many different stitch techniques that will result in the thread laying differently, sometimes just purely for aesthetics, sometimes for strength and reinforcement of the thread. Now, for your first time, if you didn't understand anything I said, you really can probably get away with sewing however you want just to get the hang of this, and your wig will turn out just fine. Just make sure that you're spacing apart your stitches by no more than like a centimeter or 2 centimeters max. Otherwise, it'll be too loose. And the second important note is that the frontal has to lay down flat. If there are wrinkles or if it's lifted anywhere, that's not a good thing. And to enforce this, instead of simply sewing left to right, I actually sewed starting in the middle, moving to the right, and then started it back again in the middle and then moving to the left. So now you've sewed down the frontal. To close it off, I just cut the thread with a few centimeters of excess that I can hand tie down. But now what? So now I'm gonna go to my bundles and I'm gonna sew those in rows with the exact same sewing method everywhere you see there's black. Now, when you go to buy bundles to make a wig, usually you get different lengths so that the wig looks a little bit more layered in the end so that you don't have to cut it. You guys know I don't really know how to cut hair. Cut to this footage of me butchering this bob. Anyway, my point in saying all that is that if your bundles are different lengths, you have to put the longest ones in the back and going shorter as you move up. So I'm taking my longest 24 inch and I measured a length that went all the way around the edge of what's left of the exposed cap. And that way when you wear your wig, you won't see the bottom of the wig cap at any edges. And then you just want to move up in rows until you meet the frontal at the top, and by then you've covered the whole cap. Because of the curvature of our head, the wig cap to which we're sewing on the bundles concaves up at the bottom, and by the top when you meet the frontal, it's concaving downwards, meaning we can't just sew parallel rows of bundles, because if you start at the bottom, you'll leave a blank space by the time you get to the top. And if you start at the top, then there's a blank space at the bottom. Obviously, we don't want a blank space at the top or the bottom. The bundles need to be sewn to align with both the top and the bottom edges. So we have to make a decision about how we're going to lay them down. So this is the method that I use and what I see a lot of people doing on YouTube. Basically, you have to sew rows that are almost parallel but slowly change from concaving up to concaving down. So somewhere in the middle, it's like essentially flat. Now, what's the catch? If you do this, the bundles are going to be thicker at the sides of your head because there's more distance in between them in the middle than at the sides. So is there another way to do this? If you've noticed that the shape is circular, you might think to sew it in a big spiral so that in theory the bundles are more evenly spaced out. But the disadvantage of this is that it leaves no efficient way for us to use the longer bundles on the bottom and the shorter bundles on the top. But our first method does. Now, for the sake of preserving the bundles and not cutting them and risking that sort of shedding, what I'll do is I sew the first bottom line, and instead of cutting the bundle and re-measuring another piece, I just fold it over itself, and then I proceed in this sort of zigzag pattern, folding over the bundle. And when I reach the end of one bundle, I'll move on to the second longest bundle and start it where the other one finished off. Every time I do a row, I pin it down first to see what's going on and hold it in place, and then I sew. You can sort of eyeball that each bundle will take up 1/3 of the space, so that is going to be your metric to know how to pace yourself in terms of how far apart you're spacing out the rows. If you space out your rows too far, then the wig will just end up thin and you might even be able to see the cap when you move your head. But if you space them too close together, you might run out of hair once you reach the top. Once you're finally done, you can flip the wig inside out and you'll see there's excess wig cap that's just flopping underneath the frontal, since if you recall from earlier, the frontal was only sewn down on one edge, so you can cut away this excess cap. That black band you see there is an elastic that I've sewn into the wig cap for extra hold on my head. You can find this kind of elastic on Amazon. I have a whole video about it on my channel, but here I'm just doing some tweezing to the hairline because it needed some customization. So I just plucked out some hairs from it. Here you can see I curled the wig with a curling wand. You guys, I was so excited to get this hair on and get it pretty looking after I spent God knows how long sewing it. I cut off the lace too and tried it on, but I wasn't really feeling the colors. So I went to Sally's and I got 4 boxes of the Wella Color Tango, 2 of them in the color 8NB Caramel and the other 2 in 8BC Light Bronze. The boxes are deceiving. It's not brown and silver. They're just both very similar shades of light brown. I don't know whose idea it was to color one of these boxes gray. Anyway, I mixed these colors together in one bowl and added 20 volume developer in the proportion that it listed on the box, and I started applying it on the hair. Before dyeing, I covered the wig block in a plastic bag, literally the one from Sally's that I used to take home the dye. Even though it's already covered in plastic, I reckon that it has holes from all my sewing pins, so I wanted to add one more layer of plastic to really protect it from getting stained. But you guys, I am so embarrassed because the red on my bag somehow started staining the wig color. God damn it. When I noticed, my face cracked the house. I was like, this is an SOS emergency. I didn't even have time to untie it. I just cut that shit off and put on a clear plastic bag. Anyway, I don't even know if that bleeding would even affect the color of the hair in the end. Probably not. Anyway, the coloring process is pretty straightforward, and I don't really have many remarks here since I've never done this before on a wig. I've colored the hair on my head. That's about it as far as my experience goes, but I'm happy with how this project turned out. I just colored in small sections starting from the back and going from root to tip. And once I reached the lace frontal, I took very small sections. I tried to get my brush as close as possible to the roots of the hairs without touching the lace because you don't want to stain the lace. That's a big no-no. In this case, I mean, it's like a light brown dye, so if it gets on the lace, it's probably not going to stain it as drastically as it would if I use like a bright blue. But just keep that in mind and be slower here when you're on the lace. Anyway, once I covered the entire wig, I let the dye sit for 45 minutes. I washed it out, air dried it, and curled it all again off camera. So this is how the color turned out after I just let it air dry and I just curled it with a curling wand. I really think the styling and the putting it on your head really deserves its own video, so I didn't want to put too much in this video, but I think the color turned out amazing. I was honestly kind of hoping for it to be a little bit darker than this, but like, I think this is so beautiful that I'm just gonna keep it this way. So hopefully you guys liked this video and that you learned something cool. I got so many comments on my last video that you guys really liked that fishy look on me. I was really against it at first, like I was like, this is not my style. But then I was like, Kyne, you're only gonna be young for so long, like why not just embrace your youth and beauty while you have it? Can I tell you a quick story? A subscriber of mine actually gave me this ring at Alrico's after a show, which he said he handmade for me, and I was like, I do accept your hand in marriage. Why didn't I wear this when I was doing any of my other blue outfits? Don't know, but I was getting dressed and I saw this on my bedside table and it just reminded me of that memory. So thank you, Miss Cecile Van Doren. I'll link her down below. Also, thank you to Ali Grace Hair for sponsoring this video. I will link them down below as well as all of the other details about this wig. Also, I want to take this time to shout out some of these lovely people on Instagram for tagging me in their work. If any of you guys recreate my looks or replicate anything from my tutorials, please give me a tag. I'm just purely curious of what you guys are using my tutorials for. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you think of this hair, and should I do other colors or other textures, other styles? Anyway, until my next video, I hope you guys are all doing well and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!